There are big problems, yes. But then sometimes it's the accumulation of small problems that also adds to it. So there is this added list of all these ticks and check boxes of, and you didn't, and you didn't, and you didn't.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
And welcome to the program, everybody. Dustin Harris, once again, hanging out in the podcast chair, having a great time. We've got a great guest coming up. I want to pause here, remind you that we are sponsored by three great companies. One of them, of course, being Alamode Software. Alamode is the software that I have been using for years. There's a reason. Folks, there's a lot of software out there. Alamode is still the best value. They give you what you need to be more efficient, more effective. Check them out. Go to alamode.com or pick up the phone and call them 800-ALAMODE. Another great piece of software that will allow you to be able to be effective at what you do, really saving 30 to 60 minutes per report, is Datamaster. Datamaster, of course, can be found at datamasterusa.com. Datamaster, or Datamaster, as the case may be. USA. Make sure you put that in there, USA.com. Finally, we are sponsored by OREP Insurance. OREP is the E&O that I've been using for years. And by the way, that was a change. I have not been using E&O from OREP as long as I've been using another company, but I'm super thrilled to be with OREP. They are a much better value for me, and the benefits far exceed what I pay them. Check them out. Go to orep.org. That's OREP.org. All right, folks, I want to welcome back to the program a good friend of mine. He's been on the program before, and great guy, Mr. Josh Walitt, is back on. Josh, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I've missed talking to you, and
likewise.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we were talking before we started recording about the fact that I took 2019 off and didn't really attend any conferences. I actually, by mistake, ended up showing up at the Vegas conference for about a day, half a day. And I don't think we saw each other at that conference for some reason. I was only there briefly, just a couple hours. But
I'm wondering how you end up at a conference by accident.
Well, the honest truth is I had a mastermind scheduled for that day. So I was there, and then it ended up canceling for reasons I won't go into. But I had some time and I decided to pop in for a couple hours is what happened. But I took 2019 off, didn't travel to a lot of conferences. So I missed getting to see people like my good friend Josh. So it's good to see you, my friend. So let me introduce Josh to you. He was back on episode, boy, can you believe this? So we just celebrated 5 years of the Appraiser Coach podcast, and we have over 500 episodes in the can. And Josh Walitt was back on episode number 22. So that tells you how long Josh and I have been friends. And of course, our friendship went back before then. Josh is a certified residential real estate appraiser, reviewer, speaker, and educator, and is the principal consultant at Walitt Solutions, where he provides consulting and contract services to appraisal firms, lenders, management companies, tech companies, and education providers. He, of course, holds an SRA and an AIRRS designations through the Appraisal Institute. He is a board member of the National Association of Appraisers, is an Appraisal Institute approved instructor, is a certified distance education instructor, and has served on the Colorado Board of Real Estate Appraisers. Walitt designed the Market Machine, a market analysis and valuation modeling tool used by appraisers throughout the U.S. And of course, he was on episode 22. We talked about regression analysis. Josh and I also did a webinar that you can find on my website, theappraisercoach.com, and go to products, and you can scroll down and find a webinar on regression analysis where Josh shows us just using Excel alone how you can do regression analysis and actually understand what's going on. Welcome back to the program, Josh.
Thank you.
Really good to have you. And Josh has made some changes in his life over the last little while, professionally and personally. And it's good to have you back on the program and kind of talk through this new. In fact, I'm going to throw it back at you. Tell me kind of the changes that you've gone through and kind of where you find yourself professionally right now.
Yeah. So recently, I decided to go out on my own. So I started Walitt Solutions. I saw a need from appraisers, from lenders, banks, appraisal management companies, large appraisal firms, small appraisal firms, to have, there's just a lot of different needs out there. And I realized with my experience over the years, I can fulfill some of those needs. So whether it is, valuation services for attorneys, or whether it is working on efficiency or methods, or just giving some feedback and coaching to appraisers, or whether it is services to management companies. So I'm really doing a whole lot of different things right now. And I'm really enjoying that back to basics focus on valuation and on compliance. So really valuation needs, compliance needs, I'm fitting the bill for a lot of folks. And it looks different from client to client. So
well, if people didn't understand through your bio, they should, because you've had a wealth of experience, wealth of knowledge. You and I, we've met after conferences, had lunch together, had drinks together, and just enjoyed each other's conversation. I'll tell you folks, if you've not had an opportunity to talk with Josh, you're missing out, because this man is a wealth of information. He understands the valuation profession, unlike many others. But we want to talk about state boards today. Is that okay, Josh?
Let's talk about it. It's that white elephant that sometimes we don't like to bring up, but let's do it.
Well, and it's one of these things, and listeners to my program have heard me say this before, that a lot of appraisers, and I'm raising my hand, are a little bit fearful, if not a lot bit fearful, of the mailbox. And it's not because we're doing things that we're doing shoddy work. It's not that we're trying to rush through things. Certainly we're trying to make a living, but you know as well as I know, Josh, that every appraisal that we turn in has mistakes. There's no such thing as a perfect appraisal. And at any moment we can get that ominous white envelope in the mail, or certified mail as the case may be, and all of a sudden our lives change a little bit. And of course I'm talking about an envelope from the state board. So tell me a little bit about what you see as the biggest problems that state appraiser agencies cite in their investigations against appraisers.
Yeah, some of the biggest problems, there are big problems, yes. But then sometimes it's the accumulation of small problems that also adds to it. So there is this added list of all these ticks and check boxes of, and you didn't, and you didn't, and you didn't, and you didn't. And alone, they're not really that big a deal, but they start to see. And so some of that extra stuff, and I realize this isn't exactly what you asked, and I'll get back to it, but some of those extra items are really easy to avoid by taking a look at UsePath, taking a look at standards 1 and 2, very short, actually. We tend to be intimidated by the book, but standards 1 and 2 are actually very short. And then also knowing any other, unique rules for your state. But some of the big pieces are ethics related. Those can have some of the most serious consequences. And one of those that comes to mind is whether the appraiser inspected the subject property personally. So it's in your certification, right? Generally, through the scope of work rule, we also sort of describe maybe what went into it and put that in the report somewhere where we're describing who did what. And so we sign a certification that says I went out to the property, and it turns out, well, wow, you didn't actually go out to the property. So
right. I've heard of appraisers getting in trouble for that.
Granted, sometimes what you end up with is, and I use the word lie, and of course, that's kind of a charged word. I shouldn't say that, but that in many cases, when it comes down to it, that may be what happened. But other times, what happens is it's sloppy work. And what they do is they copy or merge from one and from one report into a new one. And all of a sudden they have something that's contradictory. Maybe in one place it says they did look at the property, and another they didn't. I actually took a look at a report myself when I was reviewing a case, not at the state, but for a client. And it was a review report. And at one point they said they had inspected the subject property. And in another, it very clearly said that it was a desktop assignment. And so this was just an issue of this person didn't know what they were copying and pasting into their review report. So that can be significant because it's an ethics issue, right? You've claimed you've done one thing and very clearly you didn't. Same with comps, inspecting comps. If you did, great. Sign that report that says you saw them. If you didn't, then you've got to solve this problem. Are you allowed to, veer from that scope of work and have someone else look at the comps or not look at the comps at all? Or are you required to? Well, then you got to get in the car and go and drive those comps and usually take the pictures, yourself as evidence of it. So, other times the biggest deals are work file related.
Okay, before we dive into that, I want to circle back, and I definitely want to talk about work files because I think that is huge, and I think it's underestimated by most appraisers. You inadvertently brought up a topic that I think is a pretty hot topic among appraisers, and it seems like when you get into this discussion, it can be Bud or Bud Light type conversations or arguments, right? It almost gets charged as far as which beer is better. But one of the things that I see is some appraisers will do what I call the template process, and others will do what I'm going to call the clone process. And the difference is template is what I do in my business. And that is I have templates for certain types of orders, a lender order for a UAD that's an FHA, for example. And I might have another one that's a lender order for a UAD that's a VA. And I've got templates for different types of orders where some appraisers will actually go and say, you know what, I did an appraisal in that neighborhood last month. I'm just going to take that, clone it, change a few things, and bam, we're good, turn it in. In your experience, Josh, and you've seen a lot on the state board side of things, obviously, as a consultant on that side. Tell me what your recommendation is for appraisers, templates or clones?
Yeah. So personally, my recommendation, and I will say I am not on the board at this point, and of course I'm not speaking for any board, so
Sure.
that's clear in the conversation. I think what you're describing as the template approach is the safer approach. It's a cleaner approach. You're starting from a clean, sort of neutral set of pages. Whereas when you're cloning from an existing report, oh, I like the neighborhood from this, and I like the commentary from that, and I like the this and the that. All of a sudden, you're bringing in things that you think are appropriate, but it probably is joined with all these other inappropriate pieces that are coming in. There's an appraisal firm I'm coaching right now that we've just sort of switched them over from that concept.
Okay.
And I said, look, start from not a blank template, but start from this neutral template of here's everything you might need, and then delete away, or prompt, have a list where it's just prompting you to put in what might be appropriate. But don't start from another report, because you're going to have, and as a matter of fact, we took a critical eye at some of their work, because I have what I call an investigations workshop.
Okay.
And really what we look at is we question work file items, but we were looking and I was saying, these sentences don't apply. Where did this even come from? And it was, oh, well, I cloned it from this report. And so it's kind of a chuckle, but it's not a chuckle if it's not, just us, one-on-one looking at this report, right? So I think that the template approach is better, because it also keeps you in a step-by-step process. So you can say, you know what, on every assignment, I want to touch on these 43 items. I'm going to, delete or ignore most of them, but I want to at least know that I thought about all of these items on every, and it doesn't apply. Okay, I'll ignore it. Otherwise, fill it in or keep it, or whatever your approach is. So
otherwise, you might be talking about that adjustment you made for the pool, which doesn't exist in this report.
Exactly.
So let's talk, you brought up work file, and this is, I think, one of the more challenging things that we as appraisers deal with, mostly because we know what our report should look like. If they don't look right, we definitely hear about it, right? Revision requests and, further training that side, but it's very rare. I think you'll agree, Josh, it's very rare that anybody except ourselves see our work file. And I think sometimes we, maybe go for a very long time and nobody looks at our work file, which is a good thing, right? But when they do look at that work file, is it up to snuff? Talk to me about work files.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that we go a while without anyone looking at work file, but I would actually challenge people to share with a neighbor, a neighbor colleague, share with a, in the office, confidential, have those considerations, but take a look at having someone question your reports, have someone tear apart a report. You can remove the subject data, you can remove maps, you can remove all, but have someone look through at the content and question it and say, well, what do you have in your work file for this? What do you have in your work file for this? What homework did you do on this? What research did you do on this? What do you have to support what you're doing? And you bring up an interesting point about who is looking at a work file. And that leads me to the thought of who needs to understand the work file, right? Because we have standard 2 for reports, and who needs to understand the report? Well, our client needs to understand the report. Our intended users need to understand the report, because we're writing it for them. They're our audience, right? We don't have a USPAP required or sanctioned audience for our work file. There's no standard 2 for work file. Otherwise, it would be, okay, boy, now we're like writing a report or a work file report, right? And we don't have that. But what it does need to do is it at least needs to make sense to you. You need to be able to explain to someone, I have this Excel spreadsheet over here, and I have these 14 MLS printouts, and I have these notes that I've written, and I have these calculations jotted down. And this all connects with the conclusions and information and analyses that I put in my report in these ways, right? I can connect the dots now for you. What happens a lot of the time is a work file is essentially empty. And that's the biggest danger you can be in. You have, a few printouts, maybe you have the MLS and county records of your comps, but there's no other part of the story. There's no evidence of the zoning. There's not even much reference to the actual zoning in the report. That might be another problem. But there's no way, okay, how did you come to these adjustments? Now, sometimes we're describing the adjustments in our report, and of course our report is part of our work file. If we've already adequately explained a summary of it and we've connected those dots, and then we have the data in our work file to support that, we're probably okay on those adjustments. But it's important for us to remember what the work file or what the record keeping rule requires and what it doesn't, because there are some times when people will try to throw in the appraiser's face expectations that are not in USPAP. Okay, and they'll say, well, I want to see all of your math for how you arrived at $50,000 for the quality of construction adjustment. Well, USPAP doesn't say you need to have the math in your work file. What it says is you need the data information and other documentation to support the conclusions and opinions that you express in your report.
So it's okay to have opinions, and it's okay to make, I think the term that we traditionally as appraisers know is summary, right? We can summarize our work, but in the end, USPAP does require that there's enough information either in the report or, well, I should say, the work file to recreate that value conclusion and recreate that report if called upon to do so, right?
I have 3 work file rules, and this does not encompass every aspect of the record keeping rule. So
I've got my pen and paper out. I'm ready to write this down. This is good.
Read the record keeping rule, but these are my 3 that I think capture some of the most important parts. And that is, first, if you see it, save it. So if you're looking at it as part of your research, it's generally a good idea that you're saving it. You're either saving it on PDF, on paper, dragging something into an electronic work file, or having a reference because that source will be out there for years and you can safely reference it. The second one is if you express it, support it. So if you're expressing a conclusion or an opinion in your report, you need the support for it somewhere. Maybe you've explained it adequately in your report, or you have the backup, that support in other areas of your work file. And then the third one is, and you hit upon this, could appear come to similar conclusions from your work file. So if someone else is looking at it, are they going to come to reasonably similar conclusions as you did? It's not going to be the same,
right?
But can they draw some of those same conclusions? And I think the biggest problem with work file is not that people don't have a perfect work file. The biggest problem is that many cases that come before states, they don't have any work file.
Okay.
And I was at a conference, and there was discussion amongst a small group of folks. We were talking in a committee, and someone was saying, well, we should have the ASB expand the record keeping rule to really list what must go into a work file. And of course, there already is a list. It's very short, and then it conceptually is sort of general, so it applies to all types of assignments. And this was a regulator saying this, and I was the first to.
Sounds like rope to hang us with. Right?
Yes, exactly. And I'm not shy. I should say I'm not shy when I have something to say. Otherwise, I'll just sit and be quiet if I have nothing to say. But I'm very pro valuer, pro appraiser, because like your rope to hang us with type metaphor, I think we tend to think, oh, this sounds really good, but then it just becomes a weapon, and it's troublesome. So I was the first to speak up. I said, no, we don't need a specific list in the record keeping rule, because that, first of all, that won't be applicable to all types of assignments. You're never going to come up with a comprehensive list. And I said, it lists a few things, and then it says, and all other data and information and documentation necessary to support, basically what you said in your report. So I said, that covers it. So if they say the zoning is RSF4, do they have evidence that it's RSF4? If they're claiming the comp is 1,200 square feet and it has a 2-car garage, do they have something that says it's 1,200 square, and so on? So it just depends on the report in what you would then look for in the work file. So there is some misunderstanding out there on what must be in work files, and that's why you really don't want to go it alone when you're faced with a situation. I've talked with very, very smart appraisers who have had investigations opened, and they really thought, well, I know my stuff. This is a small deal, and that's the biggest mistake, because you need to bring in experts. You need to bring in some honest opinions and other critiques of what you might be facing. But even the smallest deal turns into a really big deal.
Yeah, it really can. I was talking, and I'm not going to use names here, but I was talking confidential to an appraiser who and by the way, if I used his name, most people would know who I'm talking about. This man's a well-known appraiser, and I would say, though I've never seen one of his reports, I've talked to him many times, and this guy's smart. He knows his stuff. He's a very good appraiser. Had a very innocuous, very weird, very small complaint made against him. It was silly. And he said, Dustin, my biggest mistake was I thought I could go in there and defend myself because it was so small and so little. And so I guess that's the next question, Josh. When you get that letter, what are your recommendations? Yeah,
and that's really the bottom line. And what we want to keep in mind is even when it is that small, the complaint has one little item. They did this, they misreported X, Y, or Z, or what the state regulator is required to do in terms of how the appraisal subcommittee oversees those state regulators and how federal regulations are interpreted and sort of handed out, is they have to look at the whole report. They have to look, get the work file. They have to look at the whole shebang if they open an investigation, which we can get to. So they aren't just looking at that one item, and that's why it can balloon very fast. So if you get that complaint, the first thing to do is to stop and breathe, and do not pick up the phone to call the regulator. Do not
Why,
send
you son of a...
yeah, exactly. Don't send them an email. Don't write them a letter. Don't go onto Facebook into, different discussion groups, because it does put a perception, no matter how small you make it sound, reputationally, it's just not a good idea. Go to, someone like you who might know some people. Just go to resources who can help, and keep it private, because you really don't want people out there, kind of knowing that this is going on in general. But so contact E&O if, I know there's arguments over whether you should or not.
You should. There's no argument.
Yeah,
you should.
I mean, it's just safer. It's safer. And they'll either put you in contact with an attorney, or you can get another attorney. Contact a USPAP expert. And then what you're going to be faced with is you're going to be faced with spending some money, possibly, depending on how it works out with attorneys and experts and so on. But keep in mind, you are saving your reputation. Yep. You are saving your ability to earn money in the future, and maybe your whole career. So exactly. Don't look at the short term.
Not a cost. It's an investment.
Exactly. And then another piece is, first of all, be ready to hear from those experts. Some honest criticism, and it kind of express how it might go, or how your report and work file really look to them. And maybe it's going to be a little bit embarrassing or hurtful, but it's confidential between those folks. And you'll have to face the state at some point. So when I said don't respond to them, you'll want to respond to them, but you can respond to them with input from your attorney, from your experts. And keep in mind a few things. You're probably given a deadline. So maybe they say within 10 days of this letter, or within 30 days of this letter, or something like that. You need to keep in mind they have timeframes that the Federal Appraisal Subcommittee puts on them for resolving investigations that they open. So they can't push it off, right? And then
why do they take so damn long then?
Exactly. Well, they've got a workload, right? But they do want to, each stage they're going to try to give you some time frame for them, but also kind of expect some time frames from you. But one of the things that I ran into, and this wasn't necessarily an investigation, but this was a trainee who was applying for his license. Mm-hmm. And I'm not making light of this, but it's easy to chuckle until you're that person.
Sure.
But this person was applying, and he had put some incorrect information down. And then they asked for work files for this work he claimed to have done. He had taken part in the work, but there was no work file. So what he did was he made up the work file retrospectively. He did some searches, printed out searches, and did some things that he thought should have gone into the work file. And they were able to see what had happened.
Right.
Okay? And what they ended up doing was, he didn't have a license, right? So he was applying for it. Huh. So they ended up saying, well, you need to train for 6 more months. You need to wait 6 more months, and then you can reapply, and then we'll take a look at it. And of course, that probably had some implications on that supervisor as well. Right. And this appraiser called me, a grown man, just very emotional, very upset, till he was on the verge of just breaking down. He knew it was serious, but we need to know those things are serious beforehand. So we need to know, right, what are our expectations before we deliver a report? We need a work file, right? So, and this is a person who otherwise, my limited interactions with him, otherwise I would have thought this person knows what they're doing, right? So, you might be thinking, listening to this, well, I would never do that. Okay, but what mistake would you make?
Right.
What questionable thing would you make, right? Sometimes when we're faced with things, people do questionable things that we wouldn't otherwise do. So just have that sort of shield up so that you're doing things correctly, so that you are asking your USPAP instructors in your USPAP class questions, so you know how that things need to go down.
You're prepared. We're talking with Josh Walitt of Walitt Solutions. And Josh, when we get back from the break, I want to talk to you more about this process of going through a state board investigation, kind of what you've seen on your side, and thus really get to what you're just referring to, which is, of course, being prepared. It's better to be prepared than defensive, right? So I want to pause here first and remind you that we are sponsored by 3 great companies. One of them, speaking of state board investigations and speaking of that side of things, it's very good to have a good E&O company in your back pocket, somebody who's going to support you when you need that support. Of course, there's limited things they can do with state board investigations. E&O, of course, is mostly about private lawsuits and such, loss on that side. But I know for a fact that OREP, my company, my E&O company, gives a free consultation with an individual like Josh who can help you through that process when you find yourself before a state board. Now, I want you to ask yourself something, folks. Does your E&O offer you that same thing? And did I mention with OREP, it is free, Free. Check it out. And if your E&O company is not providing something like that for state board investigations, you might want to consider going to orep.org and making a switch. Speaking of making a switch, which appraisal software are you using? Now, I don't have anything bad to say about any of the companies out there. There's some great appraisal form filling software everywhere. I know personally the CEOs of many of these big companies. They are great people providing a great service. I choose to stick with Alamode. And I choose to stick with Alamode because I am a man about efficiency, effectiveness, tools that can help me to do my job better. The value that I receive from Alamode exceeds the value that I can get other places. If you are not with Alamode, I would encourage you to check them out. In fact, I would encourage you to pick up the phone. You can go to their website, alamode.com, or you can pick up the phone and actually talk to somebody and say, listen, I'm using XYZ software. What can your software do that mine can't? That would be an interesting conversation to have. You can pick up the phone, call them at 800-ALAMODE. That's 800-ALAMODE. Finally, we're sponsored by DataMaster. I know the individuals in Utah who run DataMaster, great people. This is a company that was developed by appraisers for appraisers. This is your ability to be able to save money and time because it will do the data entry for you. That's right. Click a button, save 45 minutes per report. Check them out. DataMaster USA. Again, DataMaster USA. All right, folks, welcome back. We're talking with Josh Walitt of Walitt Solutions. By the way, Josh, that is spelled W-A-L, just one L, I-T-T. A little different than most of the wallets that you come across, right? Where does your name come from?
It's Walitsky. I think it was Polish, and they came over and changed it, and part of the family kept two L's and part kept one L. So, we have only ourselves to...
I hear you. Well, I married a Spalding, and Spalding is spelled so many different ways. It's crazy. So
I've trained my daughters. I said, you get married, you take your husband's name, you can get rid of this, but until then, you need to know you spell it W-A-L-I-T-T, and you need to pause, or everyone's going to put two L's. So,
that's hilarious.
Yeah, that's my life.
Well, Josh and I are talking about state board investigations. I unfortunately have been through this more than once. I never actually stood before the board, knock on wood, but typically walk us through, and I know every state's different, but talk us through what we can expect the process to look like if one of those complaints is made.
Sure. Yeah, it's a really good question. And you can get it kind of in your head, really, of kind of how does this look, right? And so I walk through sometimes with appraisers and firms through an investigative workshop, and I tell them this is nothing like the real experience. As much as we're going to tear apart a report right now and really pick it apart, this really doesn't encompass kind of the emotions you go through and what happens. So really, any party can submit an appraisal report to a state regulator.
Homeowner, lender, uninterested third party.
It could be someone who picked it up off the street. That would be unlikely, obviously, but that's that.
Oh, I don't know. Mine are littering the streets of.
Yeah, you're just throwing them out. And of course, then you have a confidentiality issue if you're just throwing them out. But, so they have some sort of intake process. And then it goes through a process that varies by state where they're going to take a look at it and say, are we opening an investigation, or is this just bogus and there's nothing really here that would justify an investigation? So in general, one commonality we see between the states, and this really comes from federal guidance, is that if the complaint is based only on value, then they're really not generally looking further.
I love this.
But
because the state board's not worried about value, they're worried about USPAP, right? Exactly. But a lot of these complaints, and this was going to be my next question, so you've already kind of precluded that. How often do we get complaints from borrowers who think that they own a castle when they really own a tract home, right? And how often do we not even know about that the complaint's made and it goes away and we don't even know it was made?
Exactly. And what this allows is, without an investigation being opened, then an appraiser doesn't know about it. They don't have to say, yes, an investigation has been opened on me once and this and that, right? So, but, let's say an investigation is open. Let's say there's a legitimate bit in the complaint, even if there's value complaint, but there's something substantial, there's something real. They said, you know what, that looks legitimate. We do need to look into this. Okay. And so what you'll get, that white letter, like you said, that white envelope or whatever color envelope, you'll be communicated that there is an open investigation. It might be called different things from state to state, right? But you're going to have some opportunities. And generally, they're going to be pretty good about telling you what sort of timeframes, what sorts of opportunities you're going to have to communicate with whom. In some states, you will have an opportunity to stand before the board. In other states, boards will delegate almost everything to the Division of Real Estate or to some department, and you'll just be dealing with a person there. And unless you trigger other events, you might not have any other opportunities. So you might have a phone call. You might have a chance to have written communication with them. You want to see what are all of your options. And that's why, again, it's good you've gone to your attorney, you've gone to an expert on USPAP and things like this, someone who knows particular state boards or maybe in general, but you want to know what opportunities do I have. And so, for example, in some states, you might just be dealing with phone calls. And if you don't press it and you don't push it and you don't go further, you'll never meet with anyone in person.
Okay.
Or you might not have an opportunity to have a private conference. In some states, you might say, you know what, this is unacceptable. You haven't listened to what I've said. I really need us to move to this. Maybe there's an arbitration opportunity in that state, or maybe you go to a private hearing, a settlement hearing, perhaps before charges, before the next step, which might be charges being filed. So there's a lot of different avenues that it might go down. If you push it so far here, okay, well, it might actually end up in court. If you go this direction, maybe you might end up with going before an administrative law judge. There was one case that I was familiar with where the state board had really said, look, we think you need these continuing education hours, you need to take these specific classes, and you need to pay this fine. And the person pushed it, and they went to the administrative law judge, and the administrative law judge actually came back and said, I've looked at this, and your license should be revoked.
Wow.
So that was stunning. And the board actually ended up, if I remember correctly, in that state, they had the right to ignore the administrative law judge and said, nope, we're going to go with what we said. We think that's so. There's a lot of different options, but you need to know to ask the questions.
Right.
You need to know to be dealing with an attorney who might know how to navigate that a little bit better. But there's a lot of different consequences. So you need to know if you go down one road, maybe it limits your options. Right.
So that would be my next question. I mean, I think the takeaway from what you're saying is don't do this alone, which is what you mentioned right in the beginning of the podcast. Don't do this alone. But the second question, as you started to allude to, is what can we expect? I mean, can an appraiser lose his license? Can he be fined? Can he be required for education? What do you typically see happening in these situations?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that you think of is nothing could happen.
Mm-hmm.
It could be dismissed.
I like that.
I mean, that
That's
would be
my choice.
Everyone's preference, right? It could be, the next step up, depending on the state. Obviously, these all vary by state. It could be what you might call a letter of admonition, where the state says, we believe you did something wrong. You believe you didn't do something wrong, but we're slapping your wrist. We're going to put this in the file, but this isn't public.
Okay.
And, it's not being published in our newsletter. There's not a notice on our website. It's not reporting to the federal ASC database of appraisers with the status label or anything like that. So others are public censure, where there's some sort of maybe published in the newsletter or on a website. There's fines, there's classes. So they might say, your errors that we found, the deficiencies in the report and in your process relate to XYZ. So you need to take these 3 classes, and you need to show us that you completed them and that you completed any exams that might apply to those classes.
Gotcha.
There could even be a demotion of the license level.
Oh, really?
You could say, you're certified, you're licensed now, and you can earn your certification back through the normal process.
Interesting.
So that's pretty serious, because obviously it's going to take a lot more time and money, and you could lose work, right? I mean, if your clients are requiring a certified level of licensure, they could make you retake and pass one of the licensing exams. If they believe that it's so egregious that maybe they think, we don't have any confidence that this appraiser is really operating correctly, and we don't really think they know what they're doing. Another one would be revoking the license. You could face a situation where maybe you choose to forfeit your own license and surrender it. I've looked over some cases where folks decided to do that because they were close to retirement. It was a very strong case, and they just didn't want any sort of embarrassment, I think, is if I was reading between the lines, that's sort of what it was. And there was going to be no public knowledge if this person forfeited his license. Another thing, and that kind of brings up another nuance of what's going on, is depending on your state, and depending if you go before the board or how they handle it, some states are entirely confidential in their discussions. So they're public meetings, but they will never once say the person's name, and they will simply identify the case by the case number.
Interesting.
And so if you choose to push and say, I want to appear before the board, obviously then you are publicly known, unless you've asked for a private hearing, something like that. But generally boards try to be respectful of the process, even though it's an unsettling process on the whole. But they could also even, just kind of going back to, what are the possibilities? A few others are work product review. They might say, you need to have your work reviewed. It could be every appraisal that you do, or most likely it would be a random selection. Either the state reviews it, or you have to, as the licensee, find someone who's approved by the state to review your work, and you're actually paying someone to review your work.
Yeah.
And the last one that kind of comes to my mind is restricting the scope of practice. So they might say, this review that you did is atrocious. It didn't meet the standards. You can't do review. work anymore, or for a certain amount of time, or you can't appraise manufactured houses. Or,
or $1 million homes, or
yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Dollar amounts and things. So there's a lot of consequences, and you really hope. And what I've seen from state regulators is they generally try to take a look at, well, what do we believe the problems were, and how can we address the problems, rather than just throwing something that has absolutely nothing to do with the deficiencies.
Well, this has been really, really interesting. I could talk to you forever. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a time limit here, but I do want to ask one final question, Josh, and that is state board meetings. I've been to some. They're interesting. Do you find benefit, or would you recommend appraisers go to state board meetings? Why and why not?
I would recommend that you go to your state board meetings at least once a year so you can see the process. And if they are put over the web, then listen to them live. If they're recorded, listen to the recordings. What you're going to do is you're going to benefit in a few ways. One, you're going to see that these are real people. In most states, you have real appraiser practitioners, or at least some of the board are real appraiser practitioners. So they're dealing with some of the same problems. There's arguments that could introduce other problems, but they are appraisers, so hopefully they know what it's about. You don't have these people who are totally unrelated to appraisal. But you're also going to see what are their interpretations and the nuances of the state regulations. So the regulations, whether it's USPAP or some state-specific laws and rules, they aren't going to be written in such a way that you understand, okay, well, how does this apply to every scenario that I'm going to find myself in, right? So what you're going to hear is the board working through how do these regulations apply to these different scenarios and cases that we're dealing with, and maybe some of those are reminiscent of what you're dealing with. And you're going to pick up some nuances and say, wow, that's, I hadn't really thought of that, but maybe that's something I should be doing, or I should watch out for when I do that type of work. So you will get that. For example, appraisers are really trying to tune into their state boards right now, and they're the other regulatory bodies on what do they think of hybrid appraisals. And I'm not trying to open up another can of worms. We don't have time.
Let's not go there today.
But that's this hot topic, right?
And some state boards seem to be okay with it, and some are vehemently opposed, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. That's exactly right. And it comes down to some state-specific, nuanced regulations. In other cases, they're very light on, hey, we're going to go with the minimum, USPAP, and we don't have a whole lot of other regulations. And they're going to say, okay, we're treating this as an appraisal. Did you X, Y, Z according to the minimum standards, right? And then it's very much open, right? And there's a lot of other things you're going to learn. They might have some discussion on verifying sales for a certain type of intended use, right? And they might say, well, it was this type of appraisal. Why didn't this appraiser, contact anyone who was privy to that transaction? Right? And they might say, oh my gosh, what am I doing in my verification process for that type of appraisal assignment, right? Am I meeting their expectations, right? So you can learn a lot, and you can also ask questions of your regulator before or after. There are public times where you could bring up your own questions. These are public meetings. If you have questions and concerns, ask them. Right? Maybe they'll answer it. Maybe they'll issue a policy statement. Maybe they'll just refer you to certain regulations, and then you kind of do your homework from there. But you need to be part of it, because this is the body that could possibly be holding your license over your head, your ability to pay your mortgage, your ability to eat, your ability to have a career. So you want to understand what's going on with that body.
I love it. Josh, this is great information. You have a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience in dealing with these kind of situations. How can people get a hold of you, Josh?
They can email me. It's usually the easiest at Joshua. So that's JOSHUA at Walitt.com. It's
Walitt.com. That's it. Yeah. Walitt.com. You own Walitt.com.
Walitt.com. WALITT.com. And you can go right to the website, WALITT.com, and you can contact me there too.
So. Can they also buy a Market Machine there? It's a great product, by the way.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And actually, there's information right on the website. They go to blog, and it's the first one. It's just pinned to the top. They can learn all about that. And that's actually, speaking of workfile, that has really opened up my ability to just have support. That's why I designed it.
I love it. Josh Walitt, thank you for joining us. As always, great friend and great friend to the appraiser community. Joshua at Walitt.com. Thank you, friend.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
And we've been talking with Josh Walitt of Walitt Solutions. Again, it's Joshua at Walitt.com if you need to get a hold of him. And folks, great information. As you consider what you're doing, as you consider each and every assignment, make sure that you're covering yourself, and make sure that if that ominous letter comes, that you keep your head about yourself. And there's some great information here on handle that process. So thank you for joining us, folks, and we will catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.